Hey.
Hi everyone, we're live. Welcome to Creating a Brand for Yourself as a Writer with myself, Lauren Marie Fleming, and my guest, Andrea Guevara. Welcome. This is part of the Happy Writers Days series. So I gathered a group of experts who want you to write this winter. It's kind of the season to sit down and cuddle up with a book, but I want you to cuddle up with your book this winter. So we're trying to encourage you to write and to start your writing career and to be a writer, which I am partial to because I love writers and I love being a writer. Today, we're going to talk specifically about what it means to have a brand as a writer. So do you need a brand? What is a brand? How do you create a brand for yourself as a writer? And the goal of creating a brand is to stand out among all the other writers. So there are lots of books out there in a bookstore. How do they choose you? There are lots of websites. How do they know where to go to yours? So I brought in brand strategist for writers and creatives, Andrea Guevara, and you might recognize her because we've done a lot of collaboration before. I'm a real big fan of Andrea's work. And so welcome, Andrea.
Aw, thank you, Lauren. I'm a big fan of yours as well, of course.
Yay, mutual fandom.
There's a lot of love right here. And we're glad you guys are here too. We love you too. Yeah, so I am really glad to be a part of this. I think especially at the end of the year, a lot of people don't really think about their goals and strategies for their careers until like January or right before January. And I think I just want to actually like pat you on the back for actually coming now and thinking about this in December, because the more you can think about it ahead of time, the more progress you're going to make in the coming year. So real quick, I used to be the brand director for BinderCon, so you might know me from there. I have been an entrepreneur for, oh my gosh, probably it's almost 20 years now, which is kind of aging me. But I've had several businesses, and just in the last year, I shifted from doing brand strategy, marketing, and design for small businesses, entrepreneurs, to specifically working with writers and also multi-passionate creative people who really need to get clarity on who they are and what they really want out of their career, because I believe that's really the first step in building that career of your dreams and achieving it. So anyway, here I am, and I'll let us get started.
Fabulous. Before we go much further, if you are joining us live, there is a chat box in your workshop page that you can ask us questions and we will respond to them. I'll be asking those questions to Andrea and myself throughout the workshop. And there is also a download link for a worksheet for this workshop and for the other workshops in the course. And you can download that. If you are happened upon this on YouTube and you're not in the Happy Writer Days official page with all the information on it, you can get all the information on this workshop and the other workshops and enter to win over $2,000 in coaching and courses from happywriterdays.com. So let's begin. What the heck is a brand and why do I need one?
So this is a question that is really common because a lot of different businesses and gurus and such have all these different definitions. And basically what a brand is it's a culmination of everything that you are. So it's not just like your logo. A lot of people think that branding is like the design element of what you are, and it's not. It's really the overall like umbrella of what you do and what you put out in the world, and also your logo and your design and things like that. So that's simplest terms. That's what a brand is what you are putting out there in the world.
So when I talk about branding to people, which I do a lot, I've changed brands throughout my years. I'm a writer, and so sometimes I'm working on this topic or that topic or this genre or that genre. But I like to tell people that a brand is kind of, especially when you're a writer, it's kind of who you are. oftentimes, especially when you're a personal brand, but it can be hard to decide who you are first. So I like to tell people to think about brands like this. So there's the difference between like McDonald's and your local food truck that has all organic stuff that comes from within 100 miles of the food truck. So there's a different brand there. There's a different brand between Beyonce and Nicki Minaj. And you know, when you think Beyonce and we think Nicki Minaj, who they are and what you're going to get. Walmart versus Nordstrom's. So your brand in correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of think of like your brand is what you want to say to people and what they can, like what they want to know to come to you from. So I also think about Instagram brands. I look at someone's Instagram and try to think, okay, who is this person and what are they doing? So I love Nicolette Mason. She's a plus size fashion blogger and fashion designer. She has a lot of pinks and high quality and kind of that like Palm Springsy look and high quality photos. Elizabeth Gilbert, as you all might know from the Eat, Pray, Love and Signature of All Things and Big Magic, she's a writer. She has different genres that she works within. But if you look at her idea, it's all very intimate and personal and about herself. So her Instagram is really about her, and she's talking directly to you as the watcher and reader and participator in the conversation. Then there's Amy Schumer, who's known for lowbrow humor, and so her Instagram is kind of lowbrow. And then there's Aziz Ansari and Amy Poehler, who have no Instagram at all. So when I think about a brand, I think about what you want to be saying and doing and what you can say and do. So I try to start there, give you those ideas of different brands so you can start thinking about what it means to be a brand. So, okay, so then why do writers need a brand? So I just mentioned, you know, Beyonce, Nicki Minaj, and McDonald's and Nordstrom's. Like it makes sense it makes sense to me at least why a company would need a brand, but why does a writer need a brand?
So this is a great question too, because we are living in a really odd time. So if we were living like 30 years ago, I would still say that having a personal brand as a writer is important, but maybe not as important specifically for writers as it is now. We've had a lot of things change in recent years in the publishing industry. And now when you're looking to get an agent or you're looking to get a publisher, they not only want you to have a really great idea that's well executed, but they also are looking for a partner, really like a business partner, so to speak. Someone who understands what they're offering the world and who would be interested, and someone who's committed to helping them sell, basically. And without scaring you, I don't mean hard sell. I don't like to sell, but it's really important for you to understand not only why your book or your screenplay or whatever it is important and who that audience would be that would be interested in it, but you kind of need to do the same thing with who you are as a person as well, because that one book is probably not going to make your entire career. If you're super lucky, maybe it will and you'll be a bestseller and it'll all explode. But chances are that's probably not going to happen. So you have to look at that strategy from the long-term perspective. And the nice thing about it is that when you do that, when you take that bit of time in the beginning to just figure out who the hell you are and what you really want out of your career, then the rest of it becomes much easier because you already have like this vision in place of where you want to go. And all the promotional activities become less skeezy feeling. You know, I mean, Lauren and I were talking about this before we went on about how we would love to have brands without social media. And, you know, that's how, like, some people love social media, but a lot of writers don't. And I'm not going to go too far and say you absolutely don't need it or whatever. But when you have a strategy in place for what your brand is, you can be more selective. I mean, there's a reason that Aziz Ansari and Amy Poehler are able to not have a social media presence, because they've established their personal brands in ways that they really care about that happen to also reach the masses. And there's no saying you can't do that too as a writer. It's a little different, but you know, we all have the ability to reach more people when we're more in tune with who we are as a writer.
What happens when you cross genres? So like you're creating this brand, does it have to be stagnant? That's always been my fear when I in the past didn't want a writing brand. I didn't realize I had a brand because I was like, well, if I stick to this one thing, then I'm never going to be able to write about this thing over here that I'm really excited about. So what do you do? How do you deal with that?
So I totally relate to that. I was going through that same problem. So I have all these years of experience of branding and marketing. And when I shifted from doing that for businesses to doing that for writers and also being a writer myself, I kind of had a brand identity crisis. And I was like, how am I going to marry all this? I don't understand how I can be a branding person, but also be a writer, and it's going to be so convoluted. And do I have to have two different brands or two different personas? And one day I went to a local TED Talk. Another brand strategist was talking, and she was specifically talking about personal branding and how it's really about who you are as a person. So when you think about McDonald's as a brand, you're thinking about a lot of, maybe you're seeing the visual color scheme first, and then you're seeing the products and food. But when you think about a personal brand, like say, for instance, Oprah or Elizabeth Gilbert or whatever, that brand is a little bit more, or a lot more personal. And you start looking at the traits of a human being. So you don't have to be stagnant, because here's the thing, we are human. We're not a corporate brand. And I think that's the number one thing that we run into when we're trying to create a personal brand, is we think we have to have this artificial persona of like, this is what I'm presenting to the world. And I think that's total bull. I think we need to be going deeper into who we really are as human beings. And we lead with those values and strengths that we already have. So for instance, if like I write different genres, I write business related things, personal branding related things. I'm working on a memoir, I'm working on a historical fiction novel. These things are like seemingly very disparate. But like, for instance, one of the themes that runs through all my work is identity. So of course, in personal branding, obviously that's the the obvious one, but also in my memoir, the driving thrust of it is figuring out what my identity was as a human being. And even in my novel, it has a lot to do with identity. So that's just an example. There are other thematic elements in my work as well, but when you're able to figure out what the through line is, just like in your story, the story of your brand can also have several through lines and themes that you can rely on so that you can reinvent yourself. So an example would be like Oprah. She could have just been a talk show host, right? Like that could have been just what she's known for, but that isn't what she wanted. And she had a brand that she built based on what her personality traits were, that she was able to then expand out and do a ton of different things because she could fall back on who she was.
I get a lot of people saying that writers really have brands. So they tell them to think about Stephen King or Maya Angelou or Ta-Nehisi Coates or just different writers, Cheryl Strayed, writers that when you think about them, you know what you're going to get when you write to them. So Elizabeth Gilbert's another example. I know what I'm going to get, the kind of narrative voice, the Elizabeth Gilbert's voice that's coming through. So if you can't think of yourself as a brand, think of what your voice might be. And if you do get super scared and you're afraid that you're not going to be able to write about something else, think about like J.K. Rowling. She wrote as Robert Galbraith, or Nora Roberts as J.D. Robb. You can create another person, but it still works within your own voice. Okay, so now that we know why you need a brand and what a brand is, how do you choose what your brand is? How do you figure out your brand?
Well, it starts with self-knowledge. So like, for instance, I have an online course, and then I also work with people one-on-one. But where we start really is what your personal values are as a human being, what your strengths are, and then also what your vision is for your life. So a lot of times in Western culture, we like to separate these things out, like this is my career and this is my life. And that's not the way real life works. So that's one of the biggest things I think for writers as they're beginning that process of branding is if you don't understand like what you really want and you're conflicted, that's one of the areas you're going to need to work on to try to figure out. Now, you don't have to have all the answers. So for instance, years ago when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I was unhappy with the businesses that I had. And there was still this yearning inside me of doing something else. And I did a lot of self-development work, just trying to chip away at like, what am I supposed to be doing with my life? And what I ultimately came down to was, okay, I want to help people and I want to inspire people. But that's all I had. So I didn't have like, okay, I'm going to do that through writing and I'm going to do that through speaking. And, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what it was going to look like. So sometimes that's where you start. If you're a writer and you already have some books or you're working on your first book, whatever, think about where you are emotionally, like what the kind of primal level is for you. If you're having trouble coming up with a specific, like, I want to have 5 books and I want to be, whoever, that's a really good place to start.
Similarly to that, I like to tell people, like, what do you want on your eulogy? I feel like I got really clear on who I wanted to be as a writer and as a human when my brother died. And I had to write his eulogy and I had to stand up and talk about his life, like who this person was. And there's no way that you can get up and give another eulogy. I actually gave 3 eulogies for family members in a year. And that made me really hone in on what I wanted people to say about me when I stood up. And they said, when I died and they stood up and said my eulogy. And one of the things I talk about, one of the things that came to me was I wanted to write books. And one of the things that came to me was like, I didn't really care if I lost 50 pounds because I didn't really want them to mention that in my eulogy. So it can be a really great way to kind of let go of the things that you're worried about. Like, I don't care if they mention how many followers I have on social media or that I perfected that perfect selfie. Like these are things that don't matter to me. And so it helped. Writing my own eulogy helped me to understand what I wanted to focus on, because then it became like, oh, these are the things I want to do in my life. And so I found those things for me.
I completely agree with that. I don't know if you're familiar with Les Brown, but he has a tool he uses in one of his speeches, and it's basically the same thing that you're saying. It's like, imagine that you're on your deathbed and your family and friends are around, and then in the room walks all of the dreams and talents and goals that you had, and they're basically looking at you like, you never did this, you never wrote this book, or you never, whatever it is. Now we're going to die with you. Those talents, those dreams are going to die. Like, we're going to die. We don't like talking about that in America, but we're freaking gonna die. So be okay with that. But remember, like Lauren's saying, like, what are the things? Because I think deep down. I think we all know. We just we live in a culture where we're told all the time what we should be or what we should want, that we get confused.
And I think that works not just like you are personally, but what you should be doing to be successful as a brand, what you should be doing to be successful as a writer. I think about when so I got an agent. She was really excited about my book. And she was a big name agent, and she went and sent it to all these publishers and they loved it. But I got responses like, no one wants to buy a lesbian sex memoir, and you aren't famous enough for us to take a risk on that. And so I then spent 3 years trying to build my social media following, because they told me they wanted to see it at like 100,000 plus for them to take the risk on this memoir. And that was somebody telling me what I needed to do. So I spent all this time and money, and guess who never actually finished that memoir? I never ended up writing it. I just had the proposal. I never ended up writing or publishing it because I spent all this time trying to build the social media following so they would then publish it. So it works a lot of ways in that ways as well. I also then tried to do all these other things that I was told you had to do to be a writer. And it was just there's lots of people out there telling you how to make it as a brand, as a business, as a writer. So one of the things I like to tell people is to think about their genius zone. So building a social media brand has never really been good for me. It's never really been something I'm good at. Like I can interact with people and say hi, but I never really like got how to like be famous on the internet. I've tried real hard for years to like be a famous Instagram star or like a YouTuber or something, but it wasn't my genius zone. So I think about your genius zone as what comes easy to you that's hard for others. So what do people like, oh, that's so hard for me? Well, it's easy for me. Or what do you love doing even when it's difficult and time consuming? So there are certain things I could do all day, every day. I don't care, all day long. I'd be happy to do it. Even when it gets hard, I'm happy to do it. There are other things that even when it's easy, I hate doing it. So understanding your genius zone is like what you do easy and what you love to do. And when you find your genius zone, that can help you decide who your brand is going to be and who you are going to be as a writer. So for example, I'm not going to be the person who's going to sit down and write an autobiography or like a biography of some historical figure because I could give a shit. Like, that's not going to excite me. And even if I see that these are selling and people tell me that I could easily sell one if I wrote this, I'm not going to write it because it's not going to be easy for me. And it's not going to be within my genius zone. Do you have any other things to add about like how to find your genius zone?
Yeah, totally. So one of the things I think is really interesting, I don't know about you, but I've experienced this. Like, so there are people that you want to be like I use this example a lot, hopefully not too much, but I would love to be like a super witty, hilarious person on Twitter. I would love to be that.
I mean, kind of like I do too. I'm not gonna lie. I would love to kind of be that person who's really good at the 140 character, like super witty.
Yeah, just zingers, you know? And I'm so not. You know?
I think I've come up with like 3 really good zingers in the like 10 years I've been on Twitter.
Me too, except for like I'm the only one that thinks it is. Like no one even likes it.
And no one ever retweets them. So apparently they're not super zingery. I'm with you on that one.
But yeah, I mean,
it can make you feel like a failure. Like there's something wrong with you because you can't come up with more zingers, you know?
Exactly. So like that's the thing is sometimes we fool ourselves. We think that we want to be something that isn't really in our wheelhouse. And so you know, sometimes the thing that you're really genius at is the thing that you avoid. Or the thing that you're like self-conscious about being recognized for.
Or the thing that comes so easy to you that you feel like nobody else would want it. So like when I first started teaching business of writing courses, it was just kind of easy for me, all this stuff that I've been doing to like make my business run. And it felt like something that was like so obvious. Why would I teach it to other people? But then I started teaching it and it wasn't obvious to other people. So sometimes the thing that your genius zone is feels almost too easy. Like we have this idea that to be successful, you have to kind of work hard, but you should maybe try to look for ease instead.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think, although sometimes I mean, like writing, I love. It doesn't necessarily come easy to me, but I know it's a big part of. So
I think there's a difference between ease and easy. So I think about easy as like writing is hard, but it brings me joy and it brings me happiness. Okay. And the overall result is a positive thing for me. And I don't keep hitting obstacle after obstacle after obstacle emotionally and physically to keep me from making it successful. So there's a difference for me between ease and easy.
Totally. Yeah, so that makes sense. And I would say like for me, it's like the things that fulfill me. Like it might not even make me happy in the moment. Like it might make me miserable, but it feels so fulfilling, you know? So
and
yeah.
You don't, so I get a lot of people who are like, cool, that's great that you know what fulfills you, but I don't. So I suggest to them journaling. Journaling has been a great way for me to figure out professionally and personally what I want in my life. And I have lots of journaling resources and you can download those. It's in your worksheet, free journaling resources, because I'm a huge proponent of journaling and journaling as a writer and just as a person getting to understand who you are. But what are some other ways in which you can figure out who you are? Like a lot of people have no idea, or they're at their crossroads. I've been at like, okay, my brother died and it completely changed who I am. And now I don't know who I am. Journaling helped me, but what are some of the other ways that people can figure out who they are if they're kind of lost?
I think one good way is to just act like a kid again. And what I mean by that is, like, when you're a kid, you try shit. And as adults, we forget to try shit. Like, if there's any little piece of you that's like, ooh, that kind of sounds fun, or that sounds interesting, explore it. Like, take a moment and explore it. You don't have to be this person. Like, this is the other part about personal branding, or even just a person in the world today. We think that we put ourselves in these boxes, and we're like, well, I'm a writer and a designer, and I also am really into HIIT fitness or whatever. And we're like, this is me. And it's like, no, you're human. Maybe I also love watching Frontier, and that has nothing to do with any of that, or whatever it is, like base jumping or whatever you want to do. Like, I think we don't think enough about who we are, and we think too much about who we should be, and we get confused. So I think exploration is a really important thing, and following your body knows, like, follow the feeling that you're getting when you're exposing yourself to something. And if it's good, follow.
Not to keep bringing her up all the time, but I am a big fan of Elizabeth Gilbert and the way in which she's been able to produce different genres with the same like brand for herself. But one of the things that I love that she talked about on an Oprah stage is she used to, and the video is available online, so I highly suggest watching it if you feel lost. She used to tell people to follow their passion, until one day someone was like, I don't have a passion, and everyone keeps telling me to follow my passion or follow my soul's longing and the thing I have to do. And if you don't have that, what do? Then you feel like you are lost. So following your curiosity is what she suggests, like you were saying. And I think that that's a really great, I love that, following your curiosity. So try things that you're curious about and see what fits. Try Snapchat, see if Snapchat's your thing. Try having a newsletter, see if that's your thing. Try having a blog, try writing articles, try a novel, see what's your thing, try it.
Yeah, and if you're afraid to try something, like, I know for myself, I've had fear over trying something new sometimes, like, because I'm like, I'm worried about what will people think if I give this thing up. Like, they see that I'm doing it, and then they're like, oh, she, stop doing that. What a flake. Like, that's what I tell myself in my head.
But my nieces, they stop stuff all the time. Like, there are half-finished projects all over the house, and they don't have that same thing. So I love your idea of like thinking about yourself as a kid.
Exactly. Yes. It's like, geez, nobody freaking cares. And also, like, everybody does that. And if you're really worried about what other people think too, like, guess what? You don't have to post about it all online. Like, no one will even know if you're trying painting out if you don't make it this, stupid curated feed. Sorry, they're not all stupid.
No worries. I get it. I think that's something too. Like, if you're worried that people are going to think that you quit it, then just don't tell people that you're doing it. Just make it for yourself.
Yeah, I think it's more powerful when it's for yourself.
Yeah. One of the things I also tell people is one of the ways to understand who you are is knowing who you aren't. So I remember I was once in therapy when I was in the middle of trying to be, so one of my very first big pushes as a writer was my blog Query Bradshaw, and I had articles and columns in Curve magazine and Vice magazine, and I was a sex columnist, and my job was to write about my sex life. And I got this gig when I was in law school, so I was trying to also hide that I had this gig and also get laid, and I didn't know how to do that. I like signed up, told them, yeah, I could totally write about my sex life. And I was in law school in a small little town, and there were like 3 other gay people I knew, and I didn't want to have sex with them. And so I had to absorb what I was going to do to be laid. And I was like, I want to be I want to be like George Clooney, you know, the like high-end bachelor that never sells down. And I want to be George Clooney. And my therapist was like, you can't be George Clooney. George Clooney's taken. And I was like, well, you don't get to come to my villa in Italy with that attitude. She's like, the only thing you can be, literally the only thing you can be, is Lauren. And so she made me write down everything that I couldn't be, that I was trying to be. And I think that that is a journaling ritual, you can call it, or routine that I come back to constantly when I feel lost. I write down everything that I'm trying to be that I'm not. So if you don't know who you are, a good way to do it is to write down what you aren't. So like, I am not Tucker Max. I am not George Clooney. I'm like little Lauren that's super awkward when flirting and has no idea when someone's hitting on her. And that ended up being endearing. And when I just ran with it, right? When I ran with it, when I was trying to be the one that was like, hey, baby, want to be my next blog post? I lost friends and followers and like self-respect. But when I was just like, hey, it's really hard to get laid, right? Like, come on, like, how do you do this? Then I gained followers and people loved what I was writing. Because you're going to find somebody, like what you're wanting to talk about, somebody wants to hear. And so if you don't know who you are as a brand and what you want to talk about as a writer or what your voice is, maybe what you can do is try to figure out what you don't want to be. Go through and read about other books and be like, I really don't like historical fiction or whatever it is for you. Try it and be curious and find and make a list of things that you like, you aren't. Because then when you know you're not that, you can stop giving it energy and find out what you are.
I like that. I like that perspective.
Okay, so we know why you need a brand. We know how to find a brand. Let's talk about telling others who you are. So how do you make your brand have continuity? How do you give your brand kind of like a feel of a brand versus just you?
Yeah, so after you've kind of figured out who you are, the next thing is figuring out who the hell will care. So spending time first, like, and don't obsess, but it is important to take the time to think about who would be interested in what you're throwing down. Because if the problem I know I have and a lot of other people have is that we think that everyone thinks like us. And so especially when we're really like, okay, I'm going to be authentically me as a brand. That's fine. But guess what? Like, not everybody's you, and they still want to hear your message, but you need to understand what they're looking for and what they need and what they want, because those are two different things. So we don't have time to go into like all of that, but I mean, the first way you can just really simply think about that is using Lauren's journaling technique. You know, just really sit down with a notepad and think about who would really benefit from your writing. You know, who's the person that's waiting for your story? And if you can't access that, if you have too much of a block for yourself, then I encourage you to ask some of your friends that like your work. And if you haven't shared your work with them, then share it for starters, and then get feedback from people you trust as to what are the things that really come out for them in your work, because those are usually keys to understanding what makes your work attractive and what will make you irresistible to those people. And then aside from that, like higher level thinking, of course, you're going to want all of your visual branding to be consistent, not all over the board. It doesn't have to be super fancy dancy or even super expensive, but it does need to be consistent. So when you settle on whatever colors you want, and when you settle on if you have a logo or not, or your website, make sure it's consistent through your social media, through everything that you put out there. Like, for instance, you know what Lauren's stuff looks like her website and the emails you get and whatever, like there's a certain theme there. So, you know, basically you're just going back to that model of people know what to expect. Because here's the thing, when we're really distracted by conflicting messages, like if I come to you and I'm like, I'm a professional brand strategist, but I didn't wash my hair and I didn't put any makeup on and I'm wearing like a shirt with a bunch of holes in it, I'm sending you a conflicting message. So you just want to be consistent with whatever it is that you're trying to put out there in the world visually.
But even that could work within your brand. If you're like, hey, today I'm like going bare and we're just going to like, there's a way to make it work, but you have to let them know why you're doing something different, not necessarily just like jump to something different.
Exactly. So like, for instance, if you have a really, you're trying to get people to buy your book and you have a really unprofessional website, for instance, you're kind of sending the message that you don't really take this seriously. Like immediately, subconsciously, the person's going to be like, I wonder if this book is even good if they don't even put enough effort into their website to like make it tolerable. Like it doesn't have to be amazing, but it has to be tolerable, because when we're distracted by other things, we don't hear the message that's intended. So you want everything that you're doing to be conscious. So when it's consistent, it's conscious. And like Lauren was saying, like you could throw in a wrench in the works, but then you're bringing in a message that's consistent with, kind of turning that idea on its head of what I was wearing or whatever. And on that, so 2 other ways content-wise is to keep consistent is you can stick to certain topics. So like certain writers have certain topics that they pretty much stick to most of the time. But there are others who don't. For instance, Elizabeth Gilbert is one, even Stephen King, to be really honest, even though he has a ton, he's known for, certain things, he's also known for some of his other work that isn't like horror or whatever.
I mean, one of his most famous popular books is his book about writing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't detract from his writer brand at all. So you can stick to certain topics if you want, but you don't, if you are a writer that writes on different topics and different genres, that's fine. Then what you're going to do is you're going to find those through lines like I was talking about before. What are the commonalities of your work? Now, that's not to say that, like, say you have a sci-fi novel that you're promoting. That doesn't mean that you can't emphasize that sci-fi novel when you're marketing it, because marketing is a little bit different than branding. You're still branding yourself overall as a writer. So you can emphasize different things about yourself over time, but they all fit together. And that's the important part, is understanding how it fits together. Because if you don't understand how it fits together, nobody else is going to understand how it fits together. I realize that's a little abstract, and I apologize that we don't have time to get deeper into that. If you take my course, sales plug, we do get deeper into that. But anyway, and then of course, being consistent with your messaging. So again, you can use these different methods of getting in front of people, but people want to know what to count on. So even if you are an author who's written, say, 2 memoirs and now you're pivoting to sci-fi, show them how you're pivoting. Be authentic in that pivot, and show why it still fits for you. And they'll get it because you get it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like the times that I pivoted, I still brought a lot of the same people because it was my same voice. It was my same personality. It was just a different topic. So I had a sex blog, but it was still my personality on the sex blog. Then I started talking about body image and, my book, Body Love, 10 Steps to Profoundly Loving Your Body. It was still me talking about my journey of my body. And now I'm teaching writing courses, and all along I've been a writer. So I have that brand. I had that brand, and all along I was teaching it at conferences, but it still brings along my personality, who I am, the same continuity in my content, even if the topic itself is changing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. But when do you call in the experts? So when do you where do you need help as a brand? And when do you know when it's time to bring in a branding expert or somebody to help you along when you're just not enough and you're trying to give it that slightly more polished look?
Yeah. So, one of the questions I get most often is, do I need to have a brand if I don't even have a book yet? And the answer is yes. You actually want to start building your brand as soon as you possibly can. Now, obviously, if you're a very new writer and you're still not even sure what the hell you're writing about, then don't worry about the brand. Worry about figuring out what your writing is about. But once you're kind of at a certain point where you do know what you're writing about, that's when you really need to start thinking consciously about your brand. And everyone is at a different income level. Like, I'll be the first to say, I'm a single mom, and I did not have the budget for many years to hire anyone or pay for almost anything help-wise. So I had to learn a lot of things on my own. So if you're in that boat, just know you're going to have to learn a lot of stuff, and that's okay. The information is out there online. It's just going to take a lot of effort. So you might have to compartmentalize that time that you're using to research. If you were, sorry, were you going to say something about that?
Well, I was just going to interject kind of the opposite. So to be transparent, my grandma, my grandpa, my brother all died at once, and I got an inheritance, and I gave all of it to somebody to redesign my website, and they did a job that just didn't feel like me. They did a beautiful site and they made it look nice, but it was them. It wasn't me. So now I do a lot of my branding on my own, even though I gave this giant chunk of money to somebody to make me look good. It wasn't me. And so sometimes the best things you can do, or like my journal was a better branding way for me. Like, what colors do I like? What fonts do I like? Like it was asking me these questions. So even if you feel like you have a lot of money you can throw at this, sometimes that's not always the answer. So first and foremost, you need to know who you are, because I didn't know who I was, so I couldn't tell them. So they just made me look like everybody else. So sometimes the answer is so once I knew who I was, then I went to a graphic designer and they created things around me versus created things for me.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a good point too. Yeah. So don't be discouraged if you don't have the budget. It's okay. Like, there's so much information out there. And like Lauren said, sometimes maybe you're at the point too in your branding where you're still exploring it, and that's fine. I think for a lot of writers, like a lot of my, so I have a lot of students who they buy my course and they do a self-guided, I take you basically from square one through to where you have kind of you understand what your brand is, but you also have a bit of a marketing and branding strategy as well. And you understand how to reach your ideal market and all that stuff. There's tons of goodies in there, but the point is that is a self-guided course, because I knew that not all of my clients would be able to afford to hire me and work with me personally. So I try to pour as much as I could of my being into that. So that's a good midpoint. That one is $199. So sometimes you can do stuff like that.
Sorry, sneezing.
Bless you. And then when you do have a larger budget, you can hire. You can hire someone. So it's hard to say. I can't tell you you definitely need to hire someone and you don't, or whatever. But from your own self-knowledge standpoint, I know a lot of my clients that come to me to help with preparing. A lot of them wait a little too long to establish a brand, and they get a book deal and they're like, oh shit, I have a book coming out and I don't have a website. I don't have anything really, put together. And so they come to me and we put together a brand strategy, and we put together a website and social media presence and a marketing plan and all that good stuff. But that's more expensive. But for some writers, they have the budget for that, and it allows them to take all that hard work, because it is hard work, off their plate, so they can just focus on their book launch or whatever. So I mean, it really depends on where you are, but what I would just say is, if you've got a dream, don't give up. Do whatever you need to do to get there, and don't think that you're going to miss the boat just because it's going to take you longer. I don't believe that inspiration is oh, this is your one good idea, and if you blow it, that's it. Just keep plugging along. You believe in what you're doing, it's going to happen eventually, even if it feels like it never will.
For sure. You touched on something a little bit about if it's easy for you or if it's not. And I go back to that ease. So I'm happy to do the things that are within my genius zone, but I try to hire other people to do things that are within their genius zone. So when I went to do my book, Body Love, like I am not an artist. Like I'm a painter. I can paint and it's fun and I enjoy it and it's lovely, but it's not the cover of my book. I'm not a graphic designer. So I hired somebody to do my book cover and I loved it. And she happened to be my neighbor at the time, which it was like a weird coincidence that I happened to move in next to an amazing graphic designer. But there's so many websites out there where you can see graphic designers. So that's a perfect example of like when I think about hiring somebody to help you with your brand. So my book would never have sold if I had made, I mean, maybe it would have, like my mom probably would have still bought a copy, but there's a big difference in paying somebody to do the cover of my book and having done it myself. But the inside of my book, like I didn't want to get a ghostwriter because I wanted to write it myself. So understanding where your genius zone is and understanding where it's not can also help you as a brand. So there are certain things you're going to want to hire people who are better at it for you. I could still release my book and I didn't have to pay like my neighbor. I could pay someone on Fiverr a cheap amount, or I could get a high-end graphic designer and pay 10 times as much and hate it. So it's not about how much you pay. It's just understanding. I think when I bring in experts that help me with my brand, it's people who know better than I do on this particular topic and can help me to bring more ease in that. So that's kind of how and also I think about like, if I'm lost, when I feel lost, that's when I look to an expert. If I feel like I don't really know what I'm doing, I ask an expert, either their website, which can often be free on their blog and find the information, or I hire them myself. And then I think about also when I need accountability and support, that's when I bring in somebody else to help me. So if I'm not staying on brand, or if I'm having trouble transitioning, or if I'm not being able to find who I am, that's when I bring in an expert as well, when I kind of need some support or accountability.
Yeah. That's funny. So the other day, one of my clients, we were going through her new website, which we haven't launched yet, but just kind of putting finishing touches on things. And she just like stopped in the middle of it and was like, I'm so glad I hired you. Like, this is so wonderful that I don't have to think about all this all the time. Like, you're doing what you're good at and I can focus on like what I'm good at, like you were saying, you know, and we all have those things. Like, I hate bookkeeping. So
What?
Bookkeeping. Not something I enjoy. So sometimes you might even be okay at it, but you just hate it. Like that's okay to hire someone too. But it's scary to do that. But you have to like look at it as an investment in what you really want. Like how committed are you really to this goal that you have?
Well, I think booking is a perfect example because you can either hire a person or you can get an app. Like there's a way that you can find help that doesn't require you to have a lot of money. Like when I did my own bookkeeping on an Excel spreadsheet, it was horrible, but I downloaded like Wave apps or did my Intuit QuickBooks and it made my life a lot easier. Like I can't do my taxes myself still, but I have this app that helps me gather it all. So I only have one meeting with my accountant versus having to pay all these meetings with my accountant to be my bookkeeper.
Yes, totally. That's the nice thing about the time. One of the many things that's nice about the time we live in is that there are many ways to do things and there are many tools. So that's the other thing. If you're not sure how you can afford it or what the right solution is, just keep putting it out there, you know, within your network of people too. And you'll be really surprised what you'll find.
Yeah, you could do things like take workshops that are free on the internet about branding from brand experts. Or all the other workshops that we have for Happy Writer Days or on my YouTube channel. There's lots of information out there. I am a huge fan of taking a course because I like the structure that a course gives me. But don't let not having the money keep you from finding the resources that you need.
Yeah. And don't forget to enter into the giveaway too, because
you can
do spots away to that course. So if you are one of those people who can't afford it, do that.
And for example, we have the Happy Writer Days. This workshop is part of a massive giveaway of over $2,000 in coaching and courses from people like Andrea and me, courses that you may not otherwise be able to afford. So you can enter that at happywriterdays.com. But on top of that, every one of my courses, I offer scholarships and giveaways for. So most people I know have some kind of scholarship offering or program. So if you find a course or a person that you really want to work with and you can't afford them, it's worth asking if they have scholarships or they have sliding scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
So
I do scholarships periodically throughout the year as well, too. So if you're on my email list, you get that notification whenever I do that. So.
Okay, so we've talked about why you need a brand, what some examples of brands, how to figure out what you want your brand to be, and what makes your brand feel and look consistent. So then what next? Oh, and when to call an expert. So I guess what next? That's our workshop. Let's talk about how people can keep in touch with you, what they can do. First off, I say that you should go to the link below, enter your information, and we'll send you the worksheet from this course, which has a nice to-do action item list to help you follow up from this and some links with resources that you might like. So be sure to download that worksheet. And if you happen to see this on YouTube and you're not at the page where that download link is, you can go to happywriterdays.com and download it there.
Yeah. Definitely do the worksheet because I think that'll help get you started, especially like Lauren was talking about journaling. That's a good place to start. You can also, if you're ready to go deeper, if you know you need help with this, please join me in my course. It's an awesome tool.
And what's your course's name again? I forget. It's like awesome's in the name.
It is. It's called Authentically Awesome Personal Branding for Writers. So yeah, it's all built around that concept of your brand as you as a human being, not just pigeonholed as a book or, something like that. So yeah, I encourage you to check it out. There's a link down there. Is that where it is?
There's a link in the workshop. It links to it as well. And there's a link in the show notes of this video if you're watching it on YouTube.
Yeah, and then even if you're not ready to do that yet, if you go to my website, andreaguevara.com, I do have a lot of other free resources too. I have a worksheet on how to figure out what makes you irresistible. I have some other ones on, figuring out what your brand story is and things like that. So that could be another way. And then I want to just say you should also check out Lauren's journaling. I'll let you talk about that.
I have a free journaling course. So it's at laurenmariefleming.com/journaling. So if you're at the stage where you're trying to figure out who you are, journaling is a really great tool. And it's as expensive as like $1 to get a notebook. Like this is my latest notebook. It cost me $2 at Walgreens and it's nice and blue and I love it. And so journaling is a cheap and easy way. And I have a free course. So it's at laurenmariefleming.com/journaling. And I'm always going to be promoting that you start journaling in your life as a writer and as a person. I think it's a really, really great tool to access at any time. It can be your best friend, your coach, your therapist, all that stuff rolled into one. So I love journaling. I have a lot of resources on journaling at my website, laurenmariefleming.com, and I have a free journaling course at laurenmariefleming.com/journaling. And last but definitely not least, again, don't forget to enter to win over $2,000 in coaching and courses from Andrea and fellow experts that we've gathered together. And our goal is to get you to write your friggin' book this winter. Instead of sitting with somebody else's book, write your book, and also to take yourself seriously as a writer and start thinking about this as a career. And what we really, really want is for you to use your voice and to find your voice. We are tired of people, especially marginalized voices, being silenced. We want to hear your book, your voice. We want to read your book or your article or your blog post or simply your journal if you want to journal. However you're going to find and use your voice, we want to help you do that. And that's the goal of Happy Writer Days. It's completely free, and you can enter to win over $2,000 in courses. And you can see all the other workshops as well. We have 5 total, and they're all amazing. So you can get that at happywriterdays.com. Anything else you want to say before we check out and say bye, Andrea?
I just want to reiterate that basically what you're saying, someone out there is dying to hear your story. So don't give up. Even if it takes you 10 years, invest in yourself, take it seriously, and take the next steps so that you can make those dreams an actual reality and change people's lives.
Awesome. And where can people find you if they're looking for more information from you?
Yeah, you can find me at andreaguevara.com. Guevara is spelled like Che Guevara, if that is helpful. It's pretty simple. Or if you just Google me, I think I'll come up.
Awesome. And we also have a link to your website and your course, which I highly suggest. I love working with you and I love what you bring to the world. So they're all in the video notes and on your worksheet that you should download. And you can find me at laurenmariefleming.com and you can find Happy Rider Days at happyriderdays.com. Thanks for coming to the workshop and we'll see you all next time.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.